Many so-called sceptics and political commentators seem not to understand the difference between personal property and possessions, and use it to bash theories that don't believe so-called property should exist. So let's look at the differences and other viewpoints. Section 62 of the Sale of Goods Act 1893 defined the terms property as meaning the general property in goods and not merely special property. So you can own something without having physical possession of it. If you have the title to the good, this also tells us that possession means having physical custody and control of the goods. Therefore, people that believe in no private property would see the fact that you could own a piece of land and never use it but then rent it out to someone for a profit as exploitation because you have never made use of that land. However, if you're using something, you're in possession of that thing and therefore no one should. However, if you're using something, you're in possession of that thing and therefore no one should be able to forcibly take it from you. Another way to look at property and possession could be property is the means of production in a capitalist society called capital. Possessions are other products in a capitalist society often called commodities. Possessions are things which are owned for the purpose of survival and enjoyment of life, like houses, toothbrushes and clothing. The size of the thing does not matter as long as it's being used. However, if you do not use something directly, like a factory, then you have no right to own it. As Alexander Berkman would explain it, your watch is yours while the factory that made the watch, controlled by the elite, is property. Your watch is yours while the factory that made the watch, controlled by the elite, is property. The watch is possession and the factory is property, and to abolish the property, the factory must be given to the workers to control alongside their communities. From the point of view that property is exploitation, we can see that the issue is access to meeting human needs, not owning these things. Ownership is protectionist and inefficient, and was born out of an environment of scarcity and enables property owners to control access to things that other people may need just to exploit that human desire for profit. Those who own the means of production can also choose to withhold the products if there is no profit in it, and close a factory, creating artificial shortage, which may have a detrimental effect on the lives of other workers and the community. From the point of view of the worker, you have to find a wage-paying job and give up your freedom as you have to work to all the boss's rules while working for whatever length of time a day to produce something that you will not own and will generate money for the boss and shareholders, who may have nothing to do with the actual product of the wage-paying, who may have nothing to do with the actual production of the wage-paying in question. Who may have nothing to do with the actual production of the product itself. You have to do this because you have to pay for shelter and food, which also goes to the ownership class. You have to do this because you have to pay for shelter and food, the profits of which also go to the ownership class. Instead of property rights, an alternative is universal access, which would mean that all goods and services are available and can be used by someone and then returned to the access point when it is not in use. This can reduce the theft if not eliminate it, as nothing is owned. Waste of resources can also be reduced, as people would not have to, for example, own a drill that they only use once a year. A drill could be taken from the access centre and then given back when finished with, so it can be used by someone else. Think of it as a library. but for all goods and services. Places where people work together, for example, a factory of some kind, would be managed directly using a direct democratic system, where all would have an equal say in the operation and goals of that factory. It is important to note that this would not prohibit the election of someone to the role of a supervisor, for example. This could be justified if this helps produce a better result. However, this person could be voted out of that position at any time. Private people would no longer be able to dictate how the raw materials, tools, machinery, and buildings necessary for production can be used. This is a very brief overview, but hopefully it can move the conversation on for people that don't understand the difference between personal property and possession.